Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to another exciting installment of ITEC 4242 Database Administration, brought to you by Middle Georgia State University. As always, I am your professor, Aaron Hill. Let's dig in. All right, this week we're going to kind of continue the idea of security, but we're going to be doing so from an auditing standpoint. If you didn't notice last week, I kind of glossed over the whole auditing section of the security chapter because auditing actually kind of deserves its own place, as it's got a lot of activities for it, so much so that I'm actually not going to be doing 12 assignments. I'm going to be doing 11. This is actually going to be worth double because I'm going to give you 2 weeks to do this, and there's a lot of activities associated with it. And we're going to be digging back into triggers, as I kind of promised you that we would be hitting on triggers one more time before the semester was over, and this would be the actual place that we're going to be visiting it again. So for the next 2 weeks, we're going to be covering textbook chapter 15. That's going to be fairly light, as it's only one chapter to read. For the steps, the task list for the week, watch the lecture video, which you're doing right now. Congratulations. We're going to be doing weeks 12 and 13's discussions. I'm actually going to post both of them because the second discussion that I'm going to have for week 13 is going to be a team activity where you're going to have to create, without going into too much detail, I've got to frame it out a little bit better, but you're going to be creating kind of documentation so that you're requiring users to ask for permissions and changes to the database so that you're keeping compliance and records for your database. You can actually use this as part of your team final project to include it in the final draft of your document. Speaking of the team project, your team drafts are due this week. I don't necessarily expect them to be 100% done, but try to do as much as you possibly can, as I'm going to provide feedback to you based off of it. I'm not necessarily, I may or may not produce a grade for this, but it is in your best interest to turn in something at the very least so that I can provide you feedback so that when the project is due, it's not going to be a big hassle. You're not going to have this a big number of errors and mess to deal with. As far as the practice this week is concerned, we're going to be dealing with, as I said, triggers in conjunction with auditing. Now, what does that actually entail? Well, the first activity that you're going to be doing is modifying the customer and payment tables in the Sakala database to include a username field. And then you're going to create a set of triggers. You're going to modify the existing triggers so that it includes your username, your new field, into the table without any additional insert statement. It's going to basically be kind of a default value, but you're going to do it with a trigger. As far as how to find the triggers, I'll get to that in a minute, but I'm just going to go through the document right quick, and then we'll see what all of this looks like. Now for parts B and C, we're going to be doing auditing in two separate ways. There's various auditing features that can be used. There's not one correct way to do auditing in a database. For any of those that have taken database auditing and security, I forget the ITEC number for it. This may be very familiar to you. For those that haven't taken it, I highly recommend that you take that course if you're going to pursue a career in database administration, because this is actually the very simplified version of the auditing features presented in that particular class, whereas they provide all sorts of schema formats and arrays and everything else that allow for more detailed auditing. But again, we're not going to get that fine grain into this, but this is utilizing the stuff that you've already learned in a manner to keep track of transactions that are occurring in your system. Now, for part B, what we're going to be doing is the more all-inclusive audit table. The audit table, if you look at the columns associated with it, are trans user, trans table, trans date, trans type, and trans record. And what this type of auditing table format setup looks like is you're able to actually apply multiple triggers across various databases and insert them into a single table. Rather than having to go fish for audit records versus various different tables, if you're going to wonder where's the language table at, where's the customer table at, where are the audit tables at for these. This is a particular table that will collect all audit information. That's why it includes the trans table, where the transaction comes from, and the type of transaction that occurs. And then you have just a single solitary field that captures the entirety of the record. This is going to be basically a comma separated, comma delimited record of the whole record, that the old record rather than the new record, whether it has been updated from this record or a deletion occurred against this. And as far as the triggers are concerned, you're going to want to do this after the fact. And why an after trigger rather than a before trigger is to verify that the data has actually updated or deleted correctly. If we did it beforehand and then there was a failure, such as we had some sort of validation check in a before trigger, the transaction may not happen, and then you have this bogus record in your audit table. Now, for part C, we're going to be auditing another table, but we're going to give it its own audit table. Now, what this allows you to do is to include all of the columns all the columns from your table into the audit table, which allows you to kind of, let's say you deleted a record from the language table and you wanted it back. Say, for example, you accidentally deleted it, or an end user accidentally deleted it, or whatever the case may be, you can actually get these back a lot easier because you can pull directly from the audit table. And again, you're going to create after triggers for the insert, update, and delete transactions for these. All right, so we're going to stop sharing that screen, pull up the Google Hangouts, and we're going to go over to MySQL Workbench. Okay. First thing that we're going to take a look at are the information schema triggers. And as you can see, the triggers that I'm going to have you update, there's the customer one, and I believe it was payment that I was going to have you update. And what you'll do is you'll modify these. Now I'm going to show you a for instance of how the extra fields are going to work in conjunction with a trigger. Now, for this particular table, we have the actor table, which includes the actor ID, first name, last name, and the last time that it was updated. Now I'm going to actually include two fields, the create user ID and the create date. And as you can see, there are null values in each of those particular columns. Now what we're going to do after I take a sip of water is create a trigger that will kind of keep track of inserts on the actor table. Now, if we look at the actor table, we're going to insert a new record into there. And I thought I had this already available, but we're just going to go ahead and create this fresh actor values. Goes up to 200. We're just going to go 999. Actually, we're just going to put in my name. I believe that has a default value, so I'm just going to go ahead and do that. And we're going to have to put in the column names because I'm not updating them. The triggers should be updating them. Now we scroll down and we see that the create user and the create date have been populated because of the trigger. And that's how we keep track of who's creating the records involved. Now, there can be additional fields such as update user ID or modified user ID and a modified date so that you can keep track of who's the person that not only created the record, but who last modified it. That way, if there are any mistakes that occur, you can track it down and talk to the individuals involved so that we can eliminate future issues. Because if there is a way for an end user to put data in incorrectly, they will find it. For instance, we actually have a dilemma right now. Well, dilemma is a little bit of a strong word, but we have a scenario right now where the application is not keeping track of the users correctly that are updating certain values. And so I actually have auditing features in place to keep track of who's updating values and why, what values they're putting in, so that we can eliminate the source cause of why they're putting in information incorrectly. Now, I do believe we move on to the second part where we're going to be doing the more involved tables. Now, we're going to be dealing with the staff table here for our example. And what we're going to do is we're going to insert into it a new record that has my data into it. Now, I'm going to actually ignore a couple of these fields because they're a little bit problematic for our particular exercise. The picture, which is a blob, and the password, they're very problematic for these types of triggers, and we would be doing something a little bit different for those, but that's above and beyond what this class really needs to do. So we're going to ignore those particular ones, and that's why I gave you a lot simpler tables to work with. As far as the triggers are concerned, we're going to be creating the audit table. Now, this is actually the same table that you're going to be doing in your assignment, so you can actually probably just borrow, quote unquote, the code right here to do your exercise with. Now, what we're also going to be doing is we're going to be creating a staff audit delete, because what we're going to do is we're going to go up here And the record that I just inserted, I'm going to delete. Now, that record no longer exists. We just have staff ID number 1 and number 2. And if we take a look at the audit table, we have the trans user, the trans table, the transaction type, which D in this particular instance, and this is what I kind of expect from you all to do in your exercise, is have D for delete, I for insert, U for update, and have those keep track of the transactions that are going on. We have the transaction date, and as we can see here, we have a very comma delimited set of records that show exactly what was in the table before we deleted it. That way we can always refer back to it and understand who did it and when it was done. Now, I've kind of glossed over this rather quickly, so let's take a better look at the create trigger statement. We have create trigger, the trigger name, and we're doing an after statement because, again, we don't want to do it before, because before, if the statement fails and we create a bogus record in the audit table, the integrity of the audit table is bupkis. We want to make sure that it is as pristine as possible. That way we can provide data to auditors, we can provide data to supervisors and everything else of the transactions that are going on. And this is on the staff table for each row. Now, what I did for this particular trigger is I declared a variable called rec to house the record, and I set the record equal to a concatenation of all the old values, not the new values, but the old values. And it's pretty long for this one, but fortunately your tables will actually be a lot shorter. And then what you do is you take this and you insert into the audit table the values for the current user, what table you're inserting from, the type of transaction that occurred, which is a delete. I just did the default value, which I did a default of the current timestamp, and the record itself. And that's it. As far as the last exercise, part C, you're going to be basically doing the same thing, but instead of shoving it all into one field, as I'm doing here, you would do insert into, you would include the old dot field names into your actual fields rather than concatenating them together. And that's it for this exercise. This is a lot, and I do expect a lot out of this. There's going to be very involved, and that's why I'm giving you 2 weeks, because I understand that a lot of you had issues with triggers, that it was hard to understand. If you do have any questions, please make sure to email me, contact me, put a question in the Q&A, whatever you need to do. Please contact me. I'm more than willing to help. You have 2 weeks to do this assignment, so there's no reason that you can't get this done. Even if it is involved, it's going to be worth about at least 2 assignments worth, because there's a lot involved in this particular exercise. Hopefully with all of this, I will be able to actually kind of concentrate on grading. I apologize that I haven't been on top of the grading that due to my health conditions. I know that you all are at the very least curious, if not concerned, about the exercises. I would like to kind of let you know that I have been looking over your exercises, and I would have probably jumped more on it if I felt that you all weren't doing what you were supposed to be doing. I'm not saying that you're all perfect little angels and have been getting everything correct, but you for the most part, understand what you're doing, and I will be working on getting your grades back to you. If I don't have those immediately back, the first thing that I'm going to be giving priority to at the end of this week will be your rough drafts. That's going to get priority over grading overall so that I can get those back to you so that you can do your final project since it is worth a large sum of your grade. Again, ask questions if you have a problem, or just leave me comments for how to improve these exercises. I hope you have a great 2 weeks. There's not going to be a lecture video next week, but I may release something as far as if I see enough content with the drafts, if I'm seeing problems with them, I may address it in a video. So please stay tuned. And as always, peace out.